Manager humiliates employee in front of everyone, without knowing she's the owner's daughter. Emily Johnson held back tears while everyone in the office pretended not to see what was happening. For 3 months, she had endured the humiliations from manager Richard Thompson, a 48-year-old man who seemed to have chosen her as the main target for his daily frustration. "You can't even file documents correctly," shouted Richard, shaking a folder in front of the 22-year-old's face. "How did someone so dumb even get this job?" The office at Johnson & Sons Construction fell silent. 15 employees looked down, pretending to be busy with their computers. Emily took a deep breath and discreetly pressed the gold watch hidden under the sleeve of her light blue shirt, a graduation gift her father had given her just 4 months prior. "I'm sorry, Mr. Richard," she said, controlling her voice. "I'll redo everything." "You'll redo it?" Richard laughed scornfully. "You've already redone it 3 times and it's still wrong. Maybe you should look for another job, young lady. This is a place for competent people." Mrs. Wilson, the 55-year-old receptionist who had worked at the company for 23 years, watched everything with pursed lips. Something about that situation didn't make sense to her. A young woman with a business degree from the best university in New York, with an impeccable resume, being treated like that. And why did she put up with it all in silence? Emily returned to her desk in the corner of the room next to the large windows that overlooked the busy Fifth Avenue. She discreetly opened a small notebook and wrote down another episode of humiliation. Date, time, witnesses. Her father, Robert Johnson, had asked her to do this before being admitted for the heart surgery that had kept him away from the company for 2 months. "Daughter, I need to know why so many good employees are resigning," he had said, holding her hand in the hospital room. "Something is very wrong in my company. You are the only person I trust to find out the truth." Richard Thompson watched Emily from afar, feeling a strange satisfaction seeing her writing something down. He had started working at the construction company 15 years earlier, when it was still a small business. He saw the company grow, he saw Robert Johnson become a millionaire, but he remained in the same administrative manager position. "Are you writing down your incompetencies so you don't forget?" he asked, approaching her desk. "I'm organizing my appointments," replied Emily, quickly closing the notebook. "What appointments?" Richard sat on the edge of her desk, causing some papers to fall to the floor. "A beginner employee like you doesn't have important appointments." Emily bent down to pick up the papers, and Richard noticed she was wearing expensive Italian shoes. That irritated him even more. How could a simple employee wear shoes that cost more than his monthly salary? "Where did you buy those shoes?" he asked in an accusatory tone. "It was a gift," she replied, standing up. "A gift from who? From a rich boyfriend?" Richard laughed loudly, making other employees look. "I get it, you must be supported by your parents, that's why you don't care about doing the job properly. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing." Emily felt her face grow hot but remained silent. She thought of the promise she had made to her father. To discover what was happening in the company, to understand why experienced employees were leaving, why the work environment had become toxic. She never imagined that Richard was the source of the problem. Across the room, Michael Davis, the company accountant for 8 years, sighed. He had seen Richard humiliate at least 10 employees in recent months. 3 of them had resigned the week following the public humiliations. But he had never seen him focus so much on just one person, as he was doing with Emily. "Davis," called Richard, "come here and see the report the young lady made. You're going to laugh." Michael approached reluctantly. He looked at the report Emily had prepared about the costs of the residential building project in the Upper West Side. To his surprise, the work was perfect, detailed, well formatted, with precise analyses. "What's wrong here, Richard?" asked Michael, flipping through the pages. "What do you mean, what's wrong?" Richard was taken aback. "Look here, the numbers don't add up." Michael checked the calculations again. "It's all correct, man. In fact, she spotted an error in the original budget that could save the company $15,000. Richard turned red. He snatched the report from Michael's hands and stomped back to his desk. Emily watched everything, mentally noting another episode to tell her father when he returned from the hospital. At the end of the day, When most employees had already left, Emily stayed organizing her files. She heard Richard talking on the phone in his office, the door slightly ajar. "Mom, I know you're in pain, but I need to wait for my paycheck to deposit to pay for the appointment," he said, his voice choked up. "The health insurance doesn't cover this specialist doctor." Emily stopped typing. She had never imagined Richard could have personal problems. To her, he was just a cruel man who enjoyed humiliating others. "No, Mom, I can't borrow money from anyone," Richard continued. "You know I have my pride. It's already hard to accept that Linda has to work as a cleaner here in the building to help with the bills." Linda. Emily knew Linda Thompson, a 45-year-old woman who cleaned the office every night. A sweet person, always smiling, who asked everyone how their day had been. She didn't know Linda was Richard's wife. Richard kept talking. "Mrs. Thompson needs this surgery, Mum. The doctor said she can't wait much longer. I'll figure out the money even if I have to." He stopped talking, as if thinking of something he shouldn't. Emily felt a tightness in her chest. She was discovering a side of the manager she never imagined existed. A desperate man trying to care for a sick mother, married to a woman who needed to work as a cleaner to help with the family's finances. The next morning, Richard arrived at the office more irritated than usual. He had spent the night at the public hospital with his mother, who had fallen ill during the night. The doctor said she needed the surgery urgently, but without private health insurance, she would have to get in line for Medicare, which could take months. "Johnson!" he shouted as soon as he saw Emily. "Where's the report for the Harlem project?" "It's here," she said, handing over an organized folder. "I finished it last night." Richard opened the folder and began flipping through the pages, looking for something to criticize. The work was impeccable, as always. This made him even angrier. "You think you're so clever, huh?" he said, slamming the folder on the desk. "You do a cute little job and think you deserve praise?" "No, sir," replied Emily. "I'm just doing my job." "Your job?" Richard laughed bitterly. "Your job is to do what I say, when I say it, how I say it. And if I'm not satisfied, you redo it as many times as necessary." Mrs. Wilson watched everything from the reception desk. She had noticed that Emily arrived every day in a black rideshare service car, the kind of car that was expensive in New York City. She always wore good quality clothes, used a discreet French perfume, and had a refined upbringing that didn't match the salary of a junior employee. Besides, Wilson had noticed that Emily knew details about the company that she could only know if she had access to privileged information. The previous week, she had casually mentioned a project that not even all the managers knew about. During lunch, Wilson decided to invite Emily to eat together in the food court of the nearby mall. "Dear, do you mind if I ask you something?" said Wilson, stirring her salad. "Of course not, Mrs. Wilson. Go ahead." "Why do you put up with these humiliations from Richard? A smart girl like you could get a better job anywhere." Emily was silent for a few seconds, thinking about how to respond. "I have my reasons," she said finally. "Reasons?" Wilson insisted. "What reasons would justify a person subjecting themselves to that kind of treatment? Sometimes we need to go through difficult situations to understand certain things," replied Emily, looking away. Wilson realized she wouldn't get more information at that moment, but her curiosity only grew. She decided to observe Emily more closely in the coming days. The following Tuesday, the worst episode so far happened. Richard had scheduled an important presentation for a client who was considering a $2 million project. Emily had prepared a detailed presentation with financial projections, construction schedules, and feasibility analysis. "Johnson, you will present the project," said Richard 15 minutes before the meeting. "Me?" Emily was surprised. "But weren't you going to present it?" "I changed my mind," he said with a malicious smile. "You're so eager to show how competent you are, so now's your chance." Emily realized it was a trap. Richard was hoping she would fail in front of the client to humiliate her even more. But she couldn't refuse. She gathered her materials and headed to the conference room. The client was Harold Mitchell, a 60-year-old businessman who had built an empire in the real estate industry. A demanding man known for not tolerating amateurism. "Mr. Mitchell," said Richard when the client arrived, "this is Emily Johnson, our intern. She will present the project to you." Harold looked Emily up and down, clearly suspicious. An intern presenting a $2 million project? What kind of company was this? Emily took a deep breath and began the presentation. She talked about location, target audience, market analysis, financial feasibility. Her voice was firm, her data precise. In 20 minutes, she had built a solid case for the investment. "Interesting," said Harold, flipping through the documents. "Did you do this analysis yourself?" "Yes, sir," replied Emily. "Impressive for an intern," said Harold, looking at Richard with an expression he couldn't decipher. Richard felt that something was slipping out of his control. Emily had performed far too well in the presentation. He needed to regain control of the situation. "Of course, I supervised all the work," Richard said quickly. "Johnson just organized the data I provided." Emily felt a stab in her chest. She had worked for days on that project, had researched, calculated, analyzed every detail. And now, Richard was taking all the credit. "I see," said Harold, still looking at the papers. "And tell me, Mr. Richard, what is your opinion on the sales projection for the fourth quarter?" Richard turned pale. He hadn't read the full report. He didn't know how to answer. "Well, the projection is based on—" he stammered. "Mr. Mitchell," interrupted Emily, "the projection accounts for the typical seasonality of the real estate market, where the fourth quarter traditionally sees a 15% reduction in sales due to the year-end holidays. We compensate for this by increasing our investment in digital marketing during October and November." Harold smiled. "Excellent analysis. And what about the contingency margin for unforeseen events on the construction site?" Again, Richard didn't know how to answer. Emily explained in detail how she had calculated an 8% reserve based on the company's history with similar projects. At the end of the meeting, Harold shook Emily's hand. "That was an exceptional presentation, Miss Johnson. I will approve the project." As soon as the client left, Richard exploded. "How dare you embarrass me like that?" he shouted. "I only answered the questions you didn't know how to answer," said Emily calmly. "Didn't know how to answer?" Richard turned red with anger. "I know everything about this company. I've worked here for 15 years. Then why couldn't you answer the client's questions?" Richard was speechless for a few seconds. Then, in a burst of fury, he grabbed the report Emily had prepared and tore it up in front of all the employees. "Your work is garbage," he yelled. "You're nothing but a stupid intern who knows nothing about the real world." Emily felt the tears well up in her eyes. After 3 months of enduring humiliations, this was the last straw. She got up from her chair and ran to the restroom. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please take a moment to leave a like and especially to subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we are just starting out. Now continuing. In the restroom, Emily locked herself in one of the stalls and cried. She took out her phone and called her father's personal assistant. "Mrs. Roberts, I need to speak with my father." "Emily, dear, he is still recovering from his surgery. The doctor said he needs to avoid strong emotions." "It's urgent, Mrs. Roberts, please." 15 minutes later, Emily was on a video call with Robert Johnson. "Sweetheart, what happened? You've been crying." Emily told him everything. The daily humiliations, the shouting in front of her colleagues, the presentation she had made and how Richard tried to take the credit, the torn-up report. Robert Johnson was silent for a few seconds, processing everything he had heard. "Dad, I found out why the employees are resigning," said Emily. "It's Richard. He's creating a toxic work environment. But Dad, I also found out that he has problems. His mother is sick. She needs surgery. And he doesn't have the money to pay for it." Robert was surprised by his daughter's compassion, even after all she had been through. "Emily, are you sure you want to continue with this? I can get you out of there today." "No, Dad. I promised I would find out the truth, and I did. But now I want to try to help. You always taught me that people deserve a second chance." Robert smiled, proud of his daughter's wisdom. "What do you want to do?" "I want to confront Richard, tell him who I am. But before that, I want you to arrange the treatment for his mother, anonymously." "Emily, are you sure? After everything he did to you?" "I am, Dad. I think he became this person because of desperation. If we remove the desperation from the equation, maybe he can change. That same afternoon, Richard received a call from the private hospital where his mother was registered for the surgery. "Mr. Thompson, we have good news. An anonymous benefactor has offered to pay for Mrs. Thompson's entire surgery, including the hospital stay and the medicine." Richard almost dropped the phone. An anonymous benefactor. That doesn't exist. "Oh, but it does, sir." The person asked not to be identified but left a message. "Every mother deserves to have a child who fights for her." Richard hung up the phone with trembling hands. Who could have done this? He didn't have rich friends. He didn't know anyone with that kind of money. For a moment, the possibility that it was some kind of scam crossed his mind, but the hospital confirmed the payment had been made. For the first time in months, Richard felt relieved. His mother was going to have the surgery. She was going to be okay. That night, when Linda arrived to clean the office, she found Richard still working, but with a different expression on his face. "Love, what happened? You look different." Richard told her about the call from the hospital, about the mysterious benefactor. "Richard, this is a miracle," said Linda, with tears in her eyes. "Mrs. Thompson is going to be okay." "Linda, I'm confused. Why would anyone do this for us? I don't deserve such kindness." Linda stopped wiping the table and looked at her husband. "Love, maybe it's time for you to think about how you treat people. Perhaps someone saw something good in you that you don't see yourself." Richard fell silent. In recent months, he had become a person he didn't recognize. The financial pressure, the desperation over his mother's situation, the professional frustration had turned him into a bitter and cruel man. The next morning, Richard arrived at the office earlier than usual. He watched Emily work. For the first time, he really paid attention to how she behaved, always polite, always willing to help her colleagues, always doing her job with dedication. "Johnson," he called, his voice softer than usual. Emily approached, expecting another scolding. "I wanted to—" Richard hesitated. "I wanted to talk to you. Can you come to my office?" Emily followed Richard to his office. He closed the door and asked her to sit down. "Johnson, I know I've been very hard on you these past few months." Emily said nothing, just watched. "I'm going through a very difficult time in my personal life, but that doesn't justify the way I've been treating you." "Mr. Richard, I know about your mother's situation." Richard was shocked. "How do you know?" "I heard you talking on the phone, and I also know that Mrs. Linda is your wife." Richard turned red with shame. His entire attempt to keep up appearances had been in vain. I didn't want anyone to know. It's embarrassing to have my wife working as a cleaner in the same place where I'm the manager." "Why is it embarrassing?" asked Emily. "Mrs. Linda is a wonderful person. She works honestly to help the family. That's a reason for pride, not shame." Richard fell silent, processing her words. "Johnson, can I ask you a personal question?" "Go ahead." "Who are you? I mean, really, a young woman your age, with your background, wearing expensive clothes, arriving by rideshare service every day. Why are you working here, putting up with my humiliation?" Emily took a deep breath. The moment of truth had arrived. "Mr. Richard, my full name is Emily Johnson Smith." Richard didn't understand immediately. Then, slowly, the puzzle pieces began to fit together in his head. "Johnson Smith, you are—" "I am the daughter of Robert Johnson, the owner of the company." Richard felt the world spinning around him. He leaned on the desk to keep from falling. "You are Mr. Robert's daughter?" "I am. And I'm here fulfilling a mission he gave me, to find out why so many employees are resigning." Richard turned pale. Everything made sense now. The expensive shoes, the imported perfume, the refined manners, the knowledge about the company she demonstrated. "My God," he murmured. "What have I done?" "You have humiliated the owner's daughter for 3 months," said Emily, no anger in her voice. "But that's not the most important thing right now." "How is it not the most important thing?" Richard was desperate. "I'm going to be fired. I'm going to lose everything." "Mr. Richard, you will only be fired if you continue to be the person you have been these last few months. But I believe you can change." Richard didn't understand. Why wasn't she vengeful? Why wasn't she yelling at him or calling her father to fire him immediately? "I don't understand," he said. Was it you who paid for your mother's surgery? Asked Emily. Richard became even more confused. No, it was an anonymous benefactor. How do you know about that? Because I asked my father to pay for Mrs. Thompson's surgery. Richard sat down heavily in the chair. You did that? I did. Because despite everything you put me through, I understood that you are not a bad person. You are a desperate person who has lost control. Richard began to cry. Tears of shame, of relief, of gratitude, of confusion, all the feelings mixing together at once. Why did you do that? He asked, sobbing. Why help a person who treated you so badly? Because my father taught me that people deserve a second chance, and because I saw you crying alone in this office, desperate about your mother's situation. Richard lifted his head and looked at Emily with an expression she had never seen before, an expression of total vulnerability. Emily, I've become a monster. I don't even recognize the person I've become. And when did that start? Richard thought for a few seconds. I think it was when I realized I was never going to move up from this position. I've worked here for 15 years. I've seen the company grow. I've seen younger people get promoted, and I'm still here. Then, when my mother got sick, and I found out I didn't have the money for her treatment, I think I broke inside. Have you ever talked to my father about a promotion? Your father? Richard laughed bitterly. Your father barely knows I exist. To him, I'm just another employee. That's not true. My father knows every employee in the company, and he has always spoken well of you to me. Richard was surprised. Spoken well of me? Yes. He said you are one of the most senior employees, that you know the company like no one else, that you are dedicated. He doesn't understand why you never approached him to talk about professional growth. I always thought he wouldn't be interested. Mr. Richard, my father built this company from the ground up. He values loyal and dedicated employees, but he also expects people to take initiative. Richard fell silent, absorbing that information. Emily, I don't know how to apologize for what I did to you. You don't need to apologize to me. You need to apologize to yourself, and you need to decide what kind of person you want to be from now on. I want to change, said Richard with sincerity, but I don't know if I can. Yes, you can, and I will help you. Richard looked at her with disbelief. You will help me? After everything? I will, because I believe in people, and because I saw who you really are behind all that anger. At that moment there was a knock on the office door. It was Mrs. Wilson. Excuse me, may I interrupt? Come in, Mrs. Wilson, said Emily. Wilson entered the room and looked at Richard, whose eyes were still red from crying. Emily, I need to speak with you. It's about your father. Richard became tense. Had Robert Johnson found out everything and was coming to fire him? What about my father, Mrs. Wilson? He just called. He's on his way here. He should arrive in an hour. Emily looked at Richard. Are you ready to meet my father for real? Richard took a deep breath. I guess I don't have a choice, do I? Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like the video and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. An hour later, Robert Johnson entered his company's office for the first time in 2 months. Tall, with graying hair and wearing prescription glasses, he walked slowly, still recovering from surgery. All the employees stood up to greet him. Good morning, everyone, he said, smiling at them all. How are things around here? His eyes searched for Emily, who was working at her desk. When she saw him, her eyes filled with tears of emotion. Father! She ran and hugged him carefully, remembering his recent surgery. My daughter, said Robert, kissing her forehead. I missed you. Everyone in the office was in shock. Father? Emily was the owner's daughter? Richard watched the scene from a distance, his stomach churning. Now everyone knew who she really was, and everyone knew how he had treated her. Father, I need to introduce you to Richard, said Emily, taking Robert by the hand. Richard approached on shaky legs. Robert looked him up and down, studying his face. Richard Thompson, said Robert, 15 years with the company. Yes, sir, replied Richard, his voice weak. My daughter has told me many things about you. Richard closed his eyes, expecting the worst. "She told me you are a dedicated employee, that you know the company like no one else, and that you have potential for professional growth." Richard opened his eyes, confused. This wasn't what he expected to hear. "She also told me you're going through a difficult time in your personal life, and that it has affected your professional behavior." "Mr. Robert, Richard, may I speak with you in private?" The three of them went to Richard's office. Robert sat down and looked at the employee with a serious but not hostile expression. "Richard, I know you humiliated my daughter for 3 months." Richard lowered his head, prepared to be fired. "I also know you are desperate because of your mother's situation and that it made you lose control." Richard looked up, surprised. "And I know my daughter asked me to pay for Mrs. Thompson's surgery." "Mr. Robert, I didn't know she was your daughter. If you had known, would you have treated her well and continued to humiliate the other employees?" interrupted Robert. Richard fell silent. That was exactly what would have happened. "No, sir," he admitted, ashamed. "Richard, I'm not going to fire you." Richard was shocked. "You're not?" "I'm not, but I'm going to make you a proposal." Robert leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. "You will participate in a leadership development program. You will learn to manage people, handle pressure, and be a true leader instead of a tyrannical boss." I accept," said Richard, still not believing he wasn't being fired. "I'm not finished yet," Robert continued. "You will also apologize publicly to my daughter and to all the employees you humiliated." Richard swallowed hard. "All right. And you will work directly with me for the next 3 months. I want to teach you how the business really works, how to make strategic decisions, and how to grow professionally." Richard couldn't believe what he was hearing. Instead of being fired, he was being promoted. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. "Because my daughter believes in you, and because I've learned over the years that everyone deserves a second chance." "But Richard—" "Yes, sir? This is your only second chance. If you go back to being the person you were these last few months, then you will be fired, and there will not be a third chance." "I understand, Mr. Robert, and I promise I will not let you down." "Don't make promises to me," said Robert, rising from his chair. "Make promises to yourself." That same afternoon, Richard gathered all the company employees in the main hall. Emily was standing by her father's side, watching everything. "Everyone," Richard began, his voice trembling. "I've gathered you here because I need to make some apologies." The employees looked at each other, not understanding what was happening. "In recent months, I have behaved in an unacceptable way. I yelled at you. I humiliated you. I created a toxic work environment. And this happened because I was going through personal problems, and I took it out on you." Michael, the accountant, crossed his arms and watched Richard with skepticism. "I know words won't erase what I did, but I want you to know that I recognize my mistakes and that I will do everything in my power to become a better person." Richard looked directly at Emily. "Emily, you were the person who suffered the most from my behavior. I humiliated you. I yelled at you. I belittled your excellent work. And only today did I discover that you are Mr. Robert's daughter." A murmur went through the hall. Some employees already knew, but others were finding out at that moment. "But you know what's most impressive?" Richard continued. "Even after everything I did to her, she asked her father to pay for my mother's surgery. A person I treated poorly for 3 months used her influence to save someone I love." Richard stopped, emotional, and took a deep breath before continuing. "That made me realize the kind of person I had become, and it made me want to go back to being who I was before all this bitterness took hold of me." He looked at all the employees. "I know I will need to earn back your respect, and I know it won't be easy, but I hope you will give me the chance to show that I can be different." When Richard finished speaking, the hall was silent for a few seconds. Then Emily started to clap. Mrs. Wilson joined her. Then Michael. One by one, all the employees applauded. It wasn't an enthusiastic applause. It was an applause of recognition. the recognition that Richard had taken the first step toward redemption. In the following weeks, the change in Richard was gradual but visible. He stopped yelling at the employees. He started asking about each person's well-being. When someone made a mistake, instead of humiliating them, he patiently explained how to do it correctly. Mrs. Thompson had the surgery and made a full recovery. Richard took Emily to meet his mother in the hospital. "Mom, this is Emily, the one I told you about." Mrs. Thompson, a 70-year-old woman with kind eyes, held Emily's hands. "My dear, I have no words to thank you for what you did for me." "You don't need to thank me, Mrs. Thompson. Any mother deserves to have a son who fights for her." "Emily," said Mrs. Thompson with tears in her eyes, "you saved more than my life. You saved my son's soul. He was becoming a person I didn't recognize." Richard was moved hearing his mother speak. It was true. He had lost his essence, his humanity, because of despair and frustration. "Mom, Emily gave me a second chance that I didn't deserve." "Everyone deserves a second chance, my son, but not everyone has the wisdom to take advantage of it." 3 months later, Robert Johnson called a general company meeting. He had completely recovered from his surgery and had resumed his normal activities. "Everyone, I want to announce some changes to the company's structure," he said, standing in front of all the employees. Richard felt his heart race. Would the changes affect him? "Richard Thompson is being promoted to general manager of the company. He will be responsible for overseeing all departments and reporting directly to me." Richard was speechless. General manager. It was the promotion he had dreamed of for years. "And Emily Johnson Smith is being appointed as the Director of Human Resources. She will be responsible for implementing employee wellness and professional development programs." The employees applauded. In recent months, they had seen the transformation in Richard and the positive impact that Emily had brought to the company. "Furthermore," Robert continued, "we are implementing a support program for employees who are going through personal difficulties. No one will need to suffer in silence anymore." After the meeting, Richard looked for Robert. "Mr. Robert, I don't know how to thank you for this opportunity." "Richard, you don't have to thank me. You earned this promotion through your own hard work over the last 3 months." "But sir, if Emily hadn't intervened..." "Richard, stop thinking about the if. You changed, period. Now it's time to look forward and be the leader I know you can be." Richard smiled. For the first time in years, he felt professionally fulfilled. "And Mr. Robert, about Emily." "What about Emily? Is she going to continue working here? I mean, being your daughter?" Robert laughed. "Richard, Emily chose to work here because she loves this company as much as I do. She could be doing anything with her life, but she chose to dedicate her talent to making this a better place to work. She is special. Yes, she is. And you were lucky that she decided to believe in you." At the end of that day, Emily was organizing her new office when Richard knocked on the door. "May I come in?" "Of course, Richard. Have a seat." Richard sat in the chair opposite her desk. For a few seconds, they were silent. "Emily, I wanted to ask you a question." "Go ahead." "Why did you believe in me? Even after everything I did, why did you decide to give me a chance?" Emily stopped organizing the papers and looked him directly in the eyes. "Because I saw you crying alone in your office. At that moment, I realized you weren't a bad man. You were a broken man. And that made a difference. It made all the difference. Bad people are hard to change. Broken people just need to be fixed." Richard felt his eyes well up. "How were you able to forgive me?" "Richard, forgiveness isn't about forgetting what happened. Forgiveness is about not letting what happened define the future. You are too wise for your age." "I had a good teacher," she said, smiling. "My father always taught me that everyone has a story behind their actions, and that when we understand people's stories, it becomes easier to have compassion." Richard got up to leave, but stopped at the door. "Emily, I promise you one thing." "What?" "I will never be the person I was again. And if I ever forget this promise, I want you to remind me. It won't be necessary, Richard. You have truly changed. I see it in the way you treat the employees now." 6 months later, Johnson & Sons Construction was voted the best medium-sized company to work for in New York. The survey indicated that the employee satisfaction rate had increased by 85% in the last 6 months. Richard was in his new office, now much larger with a beautiful view of the city, when Emily knocked on the door. "Richard, the satisfaction survey results are in." "So what were the numbers?" 92% overall satisfaction, 96% said they feel valued by the company, and 88% said they would recommend the company to a friend to work at. Richard smiled. "These numbers are amazing." "And do you know what was the most common comment in the survey?" asked Emily. "What?" "General Manager Richard Thompson is an example of how people can change and become inspiring leaders." Richard was moved. "Did they write this?" "They did. Even Michael, who you know was one of the most skeptical about your change. Emily, none of this would have happened if you hadn't believed in me. Richard, you need to stop giving me credit for your transformation. You're the one who did the hard work of changing. But you gave me the opportunity, and more importantly, you taught me what compassion is." That late afternoon, Richard left the office and stopped by the corner flower shop. He bought a bouquet of white roses and went straight to the hospital where his mother had had surgery months before. He went up to the pediatric wing and looked for the head nurse. "Nurse, I'd like to make a donation for the children who are patients here." "What kind of donation, sir?" "I want to pay for the treatment of a child who doesn't have health insurance." The nurse smiled. "That's very generous. May I ask the reason?" "Someone did that for my mother when I needed it most. Now it's my turn to pay it forward." Richard knew he would never be able to directly repay Emily and Robert for all the kindness they had shown. But he could make a difference in other people's lives, creating a chain of kindness that would spread through the world. Leaving the hospital, he called Linda. "Honey, are you free tonight?" "Yes, I am. Why? I want to take you to dinner at that restaurant you've always wanted to try." "Richard, you don't need to spend money on me. We're saving for our own house." "Linda, now that I've been promoted, we can afford some luxuries once in a while, and I want to celebrate with the woman who stood by my side, even when I was being a horrible person." "You weren't a horrible person, Richard. You were going through a hard time." "Yes, I was, my love. I was horrible. But you, Emily, and Mr. Robert helped me find my way back home." 2 years later, Richard was in his office preparing a presentation for the board meeting when he received an unexpected call. "Richard, this is Paul Harrison from Millennium Construction." Richard knew Paul Harrison by sight. He was the owner of one of the largest construction companies in New York. "Hi, Paul. How are you?" "I'm great. Look, I'm calling because I want to make you an offer. I've been following your work at Johnson & Sons, and I've been impressed with the company's transformation." Richard was curious. "What kind of offer?" "I want to offer you the position of Chief Executive Officer at Millennium. A salary of $50,000 a month, profit sharing, a company car, premium health insurance for the whole family." Richard was silent for a few seconds. It was an extraordinary offer, far beyond what he earned at Johnson & Sons. "Paul, that's a very generous offer. Can I think about it?" "Of course, but don't take too long because I have other candidates." Richard hung up the phone and was lost in thought. 2 years ago, he would have accepted the offer without blinking, but now things were different. He knocked on Emily's office door. "Emily, can I talk to you?" "Of course, Richard. Have a seat." Richard told her about the offer he had received. "It's an incredible opportunity, Richard. Are you going to accept it?" "I don't know. That's why I came to talk to you. Richard, you don't need my approval to make decisions about your professional life." "I know, but you've become a very important person to me. Your opinion matters to me." Emily smiled. "Then I'll give you my honest opinion. Financially, it's an offer you can't refuse. But professionally, you need to think about whether it's worth starting from scratch in a company where no one knows your story." "What do you mean?" "Richard, here at Johnson & Sons, you aren't just a general manager. You are the symbol of the transformation. You are the proof that people can change. The employees respect you, not only for your competence, but for your journey." Richard had never thought about it that way. "Besides," continued Emily, "are you sure you want to work for a company you didn't help build? One that doesn't know its values, its culture?" "Emily, are you trying to convince me to stay?" "No, Richard. I'm trying to help you make the right decision for yourself. If you feel you've completed your mission here, if you feel you need new challenges, then you should accept the offer. But if you feel you still have something to contribute here, then you should stay. That night, Richard talked with Linda about the offer. "Honey, it's a lot of money," she said. "With that salary, we could buy our own house in 6 months instead of 2 years. "I know, Linda, but it's not just about the money." "What else is there?" Richard explained to his wife everything Emily had said about symbolism, transformation, and purpose. "Richard, let me ask you a question. At which of the 2 companies would you be happier?" Richard didn't need to think long to answer. "Here at Johnson & Sons." "Then your answer is clear." "But Linda, it's so much money. We could have a more comfortable life." Linda moved closer to her husband and held his hands. "Richard, we already have a comfortable life, Mrs. Thompson is healthy. You are fulfilled professionally. I managed to stop doing cleaning work and get a job as a receptionist at a clinic. What more do we need? You don't regret marrying a man who isn't ambitious?" "Richard Thompson, you are the most ambitious person I know. It's just that your ambition isn't for money. Your ambition is to be a better person every day." The next day, Richard called Paul Harrison. "Paul, I really appreciate the offer, but I'm going to stay at Johnson & Sons." "Richard, are you sure I can increase the offer to 60,000? "I'm sure, Paul, thank you really, but my place is here." When Richard told Robert about the offer he had refused, the businessman was impressed. "Richard, you know that Millennium is a company 3 times bigger than ours, right?" "I know, Mr. Robert. And you know I probably won't be able to match the salary they offered, right?" "I know that too." "Then why did you refuse?" Richard thought for a few seconds before answering. "Because here I'm not just an employee. I'm part of the family." Robert smiled and gave Richard a pat on the shoulder. "You know what that means?" "What?" "It means my daughter was right about you from day one." 5 years after that first day of humiliation, Johnson & Sons Construction was celebrating its best financial results in history. The company had grown 200% and opened branches in 3 states. Richard, now 53, was at the celebration party watching all the employees having fun. Emily approached him. "Richard, are you okay? You look thoughtful." "I'm thinking about how life can change in unexpected ways." "How so?" 5 years ago, I was a bitter, frustrated man who took his frustrations out on innocent people. Today, I'm the general manager of a prosperous company. I'm respected by the employees. I have a happy family. And all of this started when you decided to believe in me." "Richard, how many times do I have to tell you that the transformation was yours?" "Many more times," he laughed. "But let me tell you something you don't know." "What?" "Last week, a young employee from the finance department came to talk to me. He was going through personal problems and was taking it out on his colleagues. It reminded me a lot of myself 5 years ago." "And what did you do?" "The same thing you all did for me. I talked with him, understood his situation, offered help, and you know what he told me at the end of the conversation?" "What?" "He said, 'Mr. Richard, thank you for not giving up on me.' And I thought, now I understand how you felt when you decided not to give up on me." Emily was moved. "Richard, you've become a true leader." "I've become a true human being," he corrected. "Leadership is a consequence." The party continued late into the night. When everyone had left, Richard stayed alone in the office organizing a few things. He opened the desk drawer and took out a photo he had kept for 5 years. It was the photo from the company's holiday party the year before Emily arrived. In the photo, he had a stern expression, distant from the other employees. He looked like a completely different person from the man he was today. Richard put the photo back in the drawer. He liked to look at it from time to time to remember where he had come from and to be sure he would never go back there. In the hallway, he found Linda finishing cleaning one of the rooms. "Linda, you're still here." "Hi, honey. I was just finishing up a few little things." "The party was beautiful, wasn't it?" "Yes, it was." "Linda, can I ask you a question?" "Of course." "Are you proud of me?" Linda stopped what she was doing and looked at her husband. "Richard, I have always been proud of you. Even during the most difficult times. Even when I was a horrible person?" "You were never a horrible person. You were a person who was suffering, And people who suffer sometimes make other people suffer too. But deep down, you were always the good man I knew. Richard hugged his wife. I love you, Linda. I love you too, Richard. And you know what I love most about you. What? It's that you never stop trying to be a better person. The following Monday, Richard arrived at the office and found a letter on his desk. It was from a former employee who had quit during the period when Richard was being difficult with everyone. Mr. Richard, my name is Frank Williams. I worked at the company between 2018 and 2019 in the construction department. I quit because I couldn't take the work environment anymore, which had become very heavy. I'm writing this letter because I heard from friends who still work there that you have completely changed and that the company has become a wonderful place to work. I wanted to ask if there might be a possibility for me to come back. I know I left abruptly and that you might not want to give me a second chance, but I would very much like to be part of this new phase of Johnson & Sons. Sincerely, Frank Williams. Richard was moved reading the letter. He remembered Frank, a dedicated, competent young man who had left precisely because of the toxic environment Richard had created. He picked up the phone and called Frank. Frank, this is Richard from Johnson & Sons. Mr. Richard, you received my letter. Yes, I did, and I want to talk to you in person. Can you come here this afternoon? Yes, sir. What time? Is 3 o'clock good for you? Perfect. Thank you so much for the opportunity. At 3 o'clock, Frank entered Richard's office. He was visibly nervous. Frank, have a seat. Would you like some coffee, some water? A coffee would be great, thank you. Richard poured the coffee and sat down in front of Frank. Frank, first I want to apologize to you. Frank was surprised. Apologize for what, Mr. Richard? For creating a work environment that forced you to leave. I know you liked working here and that you left because of me. Mr. Richard, you don't need to... Yes, I do, Frank. I became a difficult person to be around and I affected the lives of many people, including yours. Frank fell silent, processing those words. Frank, do you really want to come back to work here? Yes, I do, Mr. Richard, very much. Then you're hired. You can start next Monday. Frank couldn't believe it. Really? Really? And Frank, I want to assure you of one thing. The person you are going to meet here is not the same one you left 5 years ago. Mr. Richard, I've heard that you have changed a great deal. I have indeed, and this change was only possible because some very special people believed in me when I didn't deserve it. When Frank left the room, Richard felt fulfilled. He was getting the chance to correct past mistakes, to bring back people who had been hurt by his former actions. That afternoon, he knocked on Emily's office door. Emily, I need to tell you something. Go ahead, Richard. Richard told her about Frank, about the letter, about the hiring. What a beautiful story, Richard. You are correcting the mistakes of the past. I'm trying. And you know what else? I want to create a program to try to bring back all the employees who left because of me. Really? Really? I want to send letters to all of them, apologizing and offering them the chance to come back if they want. Emily smiled. My father is going to love this idea. Emily, can I ask you a personal question? Go ahead. Do you regret having spent 3 months of your life being humiliated by an idiot like me? Emily laughed. Richard, those 3 months were the most important of my life. How so? Because they taught me that all people deserve compassion. They taught me that behind every difficult person there is a story of pain. They taught me that believing in people can transform lives. But you suffered a lot. I did. But the suffering was worth it when I saw your transformation. When I saw that it is indeed possible to change, that there is no such thing as a hopeless person. Richard was moved. Are you sure you're not an angel? I'm sure, she laughed. I'm just someone who was lucky enough to have parents who taught me about forgiveness and second chances. 6 months later, 8 of the 12 former employees who had left because of the toxic environment returned to the company. Johnson & Sons Construction became known not only for the quality of its buildings, but also for its humanized organizational culture. Richard had become a reference in transformational leadership. He received invitations to give lectures at universities and companies, telling his story of personal and professional transformation. At one of these lectures at Columbia University, he ended his presentation with these words: "I want to finish by telling you what the greatest lesson I've learned in recent years has been. I learned that there is no such thing as a hopeless person. There are only people who haven't yet found someone who believes in them. I was lucky enough to find people who believed in me when I didn't even believe in myself. So, my message to you is, believe in people, even the most difficult ones, because sometimes just one person believing can be enough to change an entire life." The students gave him a standing ovation. After the lecture, a young woman approached Richard. "Professor Richard, my name is Amy Parker. I wanted to thank you for your lecture." "Thank you, Amy Parker. Why specifically?" "Because I work with my father at his company, and he has been very difficult with me, always yelling, humiliating me. I was thinking about leaving, but after hearing your story, I think I will try to talk to him, to understand if he's going through something." Richard smiled. "Amy Parker, that could be the most important conversation of both your lives. Do you think it's possible for him to change?" "I know it's possible. I am the living proof that it is possible." Amy Parker left the university with a completely new perspective on the situation with her father. Richard was left thinking about how one story of transformation can inspire other transformations. On his way back home, he called Emily. "Emily, I just gave a lecture at Columbia. How did it go?" "Incredible. And you know what else? A young woman came to talk to me afterward. She's going through the same situation with her father that you went through with me." "Really?" "Really. And she said she's going to try to talk to him, try to understand what's happening, because she heard our story. Richard, you have no idea how many people you might be helping by telling that story. It's strange to think about it. Something that started as the worst period of my life became the most important story I have to tell. That's how it works, Richard. Our greatest pains can become our greatest contribution to the world." 2 years later, Richard was at home with Linda, watching the news, when a report caught his attention. Businesswoman Amy Parker Roberts, 28, was elected Young Entrepreneur of the Year by the New York Chamber of Commerce, said the anchor. Richard recognized the name immediately. It was the young woman he had spoken with after his lecture at Columbia. Amy Parker turned her father's construction company, which was almost bankrupt, into one of the most prosperous in the region. The key difference, according to her, was implementing an organizational culture based on respect and valuing employees. The camera focused on Amy, who was being interviewed. "It all started when I heard a lecture by a businessman named Richard Thompson, who told how he was transformed by the compassion of a co-worker. That inspired me to talk to my father about our problems and to work together to create a better environment in our company." Richard was moved watching the report. His story had truly inspired the transformation of another company, of another family. Linda noticed her husband's emotion. "Richard, are you crying?" "I'm emotional, Linda. Remember Amy, the one I told you about? The girl from the lecture? That's her. Look what came of her conversation with her father." Richard picked up his phone and looked for Amy's contact. He sent a message. "Amy, I just saw the report on TV. Congratulations on the award. I'm so happy to know our conversation inspired you to transform your company. You are proof that kindness multiplies." A few minutes later, Amy replied, "Mr. Thompson, what a joy to know you saw the report. You have no idea the impact your story had on my life and my family's life. My father has completely changed, our company is thriving, and our employees are happy. It all started with your lecture. Thank you so much." Richard showed the message to Linda, who was also moved. "Richard, do you realize what happened? Your transformation inspired her transformation, which inspired her father's transformation, which transformed an entire company. It's incredible how one action can have effects we can't even imagine. That's why Emily always says it's worth believing in people." The following week, Richard received an unexpected invitation. Amy was inviting him to be a speaker at her company's annual event. "Mr. Thompson, our employees would love to hear the original story that inspired our company's transformation." Richard accepted the invitation. On the day of the event, he found a vibrant company, with smiling employees and a welcoming atmosphere. Amy introduced him to her father, Mr. Charles Roberts, a man in his 60s who welcomed him with tears in his eyes. "Mr. Thompson, I don't know how to thank you. Your story saved my family and my company." "Mr. Roberts, it was the love between you two that saved it. I just shared an experience." "Mr. Thompson, when my daughter came to talk to me about change, about compassion, about second chances, I thought it was just idealistic young person talk. But she insisted so much that I decided to give it a try." "And how was it?" "Difficult at first. I had been bitter for years, frustrated with the company's results, taking it out on the employees. But when I started treating them like human beings instead of machines, everything changed." Richard smiled. "That's exactly what happened to me." During the talk, Richard told his whole story, from the first days of humiliation by Emily to his complete transformation. The employees at Amy Parker's company were visibly moved. At the end, a gentleman over 60 years old stood up in the audience. "Mr. Richard, my name is Joseph Sanders. I've worked here for 20 years. I wanted to thank you for your talk because it made me understand something important." "What is it, Mr. Joseph?" "I always held a grudge against Mr. Michael for all the years he was difficult with us. Even after he changed, I still held resentment. But listening to your story, I realized he was going through hardships I didn't know about, and I realized that I need to give him a second chance too." Mr. Michael was moved hearing those words. He stood up and went to where Joseph was sitting. "Mr. Joseph, I apologize for all the years I was unfair to you." Joseph stood up and hugged his boss. "Mr. Michael, we are here to build the future, not to stay stuck in the past." The entire audience applauded. Richard watched that scene with a heart full of gratitude. His story was generating reconciliations and transformations in places he never imagined. After the event, Amy Parker walked Richard to his car. "Mr. Richard, can I ask you a question?" "Of course." "What do you think would have happened if Emily hadn't given you a second chance?" Richard thought for a few seconds. "I probably would have been fired. My mother would have gone without treatment. I would have become an even more bitter person. And I most likely would have destroyed my marriage too. And now? Now I am happy. I have a fulfilling career, a solid marriage. My mother is in good health. And most importantly, I sleep peacefully every night, knowing I am a person who contributes positively to the lives of others." "Mr. Richard, thank you for changing, because your change changed many other lives." On the way back to New York, Richard called Emily. "Emily, I need to tell you how Amy Parker's event went." He told her every detail, the reconciliation between Michael and Joseph, the impact of the story on those people's lives. "Richard, do you realize you've become an agent of transformation?" "How so?" "You're not just telling a story. You're planting seeds of change in people, and those seeds are sprouting into real transformations." "Emily, none of this would have happened if you hadn't planted the first seed in me." "Richard, stop that. You need to take credit for the good things you are doing." "Okay, I'll try, but I want you to know that you continue to be my inspiration to be a better person. And you continue to be my inspiration to never give up on people." 10 years after the first day of humiliation, Richard was in his office preparing for his retirement. At 58 years old, he had decided to dedicate himself fully to talks and organizational transformation consulting. Emily, now 32, would take over the position of general director of the company. Richard couldn't be prouder of his successor. "Richard, are you sure you want to retire?" asked Robert Johnson, now 75 but still active in the company. "I am, Mr. Robert. I feel my mission here has been fulfilled. Now I want to take our message of transformation to other companies, other people." "Richard, in these 10 years, you have transformed not only yourself, but the entire culture of our company. I couldn't be prouder. Mr. Robert, you and Emily saved my life, literally." "Richard, you saved your own life. We just believed it was worth betting on you, At Richard's farewell party, all the company employees were present. Many of them had been hired during the years he was general manager and knew him only as an inspiring leader. Frank Williams, who had returned to the company years earlier, gave a moving speech. "Folks, I want to talk about Richard as someone who knew him before and after the transformation. I worked here when he was still finding his way as a leader. I left the company and came back years later to find a completely changed man." Frank looked directly at Richard. "Richard, thank you for giving me the chance to come back. Thank you for showing me that we can all change, evolve, be better people. You are living proof that it's never too late to start over." Mrs. Wilson, now retired but present at the party, also wanted to speak. "Richard, I saw you at your worst moments and at your best moments, and I can say your transformation was the most beautiful thing I witnessed in all my working years." Richard was moved. He looked around and saw Linda, his mother Mrs. Thompson, now 80 years old and perfectly healthy, Robert, Emily, all the employees who had been part of his journey. "Folks, when I started working at this company 15 years ago, I had many professional dreams. I wanted to grow, make money, gain recognition. I achieved all that, but I discovered that wasn't what really mattered." Richard paused, gathering his thoughts. "What really matters is people, human connections, the ability to make a difference in the lives of others, and most importantly, the courage to admit when we are wrong and the humility to accept help to change." He looked at Emily. "Emily, I will never be able to repay everything you did for me. You taught me that kindness is not weakness, that compassion is strength, that believing in people can transform the world." Emily was crying. "Richard, you've already repaid everything. You became the person I always saw you could be. And now," Richard continued, "I'm going to try to do for others what you all did for me. I will try to plant seeds of transformation in other lives, in other companies." The party continued late into the night. When everyone had left, Richard stayed alone in his office one last time. He opened the drawer and took out that old photo, from the time he was a bitter person. He looked at the photo for a few minutes, remembering who he was and who he had become. Then, he tore the photo into small pieces and threw it in the trash. He didn't need that reminder anymore. Now he carried the certainty of his transformation in his heart. End of story. And you, dear listener, what did you think of this story of transformation? Do you believe people can really change when someone believes in them? Tell us in the comments which part moved you the most, and if you've ever been through a similar situation. Leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories like this one. Your participation is very important to us.